Your four favorites are Mulholland Drive, Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, Inland Empire, and Pink Floyd The Wall. And you've already seen almost every movie I'd recommend to a David Lynch and Pink Floyd fan, but my top choice for you is Out of the Blue. It depicts a teenage girl living in an abusive environment like Fire Walk with Me, and it may not involve Pink Floyd specifically, but the main character is passionate about music. Last year, Marienbad was cited as an influence for Inland Empire, but you can feel its influence in Mulholland Drive and Fire Walk with Me as well. It feels like watching a dream or memories where you aren't sure what's real, and it feels hallucinatory like The Wall, but in a much more subdued manner. Carnival of Souls was also an influence for Lynch, and like Mulholland Drive, a car crash is what sets the story into motion. Like Fire Walk with Me, it follows a young woman who's haunted by visions of a certain man. It very much has that a woman in trouble vibe like Inland Empire and feels surreal and nightmarish. And like The Wall, it depicts someone who's isolated and questioning their sanity. Laura inspired multiple aspects of Twin Peaks, as did Experiment in Terror. And I'm not sure if you're a Lana Del Rey fan or if I'm just making that assumption based on your Letterboxd username, but she used the score for this film during one of her tours. I get the feeling you might like Picnic at Hanging Rock because it has a hazy, dreamlike, mysterious atmosphere and doesn't provide explanations, much like a Lynch film. And the strict school environment is sort of comparable to some aspects of The Wall. Opening night is about an actress like Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire. It's psychological and deals with trauma like Fire Walk with Me, and it depicts an artist experiencing a mental breakdown like The Wall. Performance is about identity like Mulholland Drive, and it blurs the line between performance and reality like Inland Empire. It deals with some dark themes like Fire Walk with Me, and like The Wall, it's about rock music and feels psychedelic at times. Since the three Lynch films in your favorites incorporate this theme of a woman in trouble, I want to recommend Lilia Forever, which also focuses on the traumatic life of a teenage girl like Fire Walk with Me. And like The Wall, it's about a young person being failed by society and the systems that surround them. Wanda also came to mind when I was thinking of your favorite Lynch films. And Madeline's Madeline came to mind because it's about an actress like Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire and blurs the line between performance and reality. Like Fire Walk with Me, the main character is a teenage girl who's experiencing psychological distress due to one of her parents. And it's got some surreal imagery like The Wall. I think Lake Mungo is worth checking out because it feels like it was very much inspired by Twin Peaks. The characters even have the last name Palmer. This might be an unpopular opinion since I know a lot of people dislike it, but Under the Silver Lake feels like one of the few movies in recent years that feels worthy of the label Lynchian. And like The Wall, it has a lot to do with music. Bad Girls Go to Hell is about dreams like Mulholland Drive. It's about a woman in an abusive situation like Fire Walk with Me. Like Inland Empire, it plays with our perception of reality. And like The Wall, it uses one character's trauma to critique larger social structures. Juliet of the Spirits also involves dreams like Mulholland Drive. Like Fire Walk with Me, it uses a woman's visions, dreams, and memories to explore childhood trauma. Like Inland Empire, it blurs the line between fantasy and reality. And like The Wall, it incorporates surreal imagery and externalizes the main character's psychological state. Sid and Nancy is about people who work in the entertainment industry like Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire. Like Fire Walk with Me, it's about abuse and addiction. And like The Wall, it's about rock music. Speaking of rock music, I think you might like Ladies and Gentlemen, The Fabulous Stains. Like The Wall, it's about music, rebellion, and young people pushing back against the system. Like Inland Empire, Laura Dern is one of the stars. Like Fire Walk with Me, it explores the pressures that society instills on teenage girls. And like Mulholland Drive, it's about show business and identity. Tommy is a psychedelic rock opera about a man who had a traumatic childhood like The Wall. It's about trauma and abuse like Fire Walk with Me. And like Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire, it uses surreal imagery to externalize the protagonist's psychological state. Santa Sangre is also a surreal film about childhood trauma. Belladonna of Sadness uses animation and psychedelic visuals like The Wall. It feels dreamlike and surreal like Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire. And like Fire Walk with Me, it's about female trauma. And a few more films that feel surreal and nightmarish that explore themes pertaining to trauma and identity are The Face of Another, Hour of the Wolf, and Seconds.